Hello guys, it's Joey. Welcome back to I Can't Witch Without, the series in which every week I have a look at a particular item which I incorporate into my witchy practice with regularity. And from week to week we vary what it is. It could be a herb, a flower, a crystal. This week, technically speaking, it's a fruit, technically speaking, although we're going to cover the plant as a whole. So just to precursor this video, as always, this mini-series is not to say that you must have blank to be a witch. That's not what the series is about. It's just taking a good deep look at items which can become part of my regular practice. We give two sources, so sorry, I just got completely distracted by the fact there is a caterpillar on the window. Hang on. Right, where are you? You see him? Hello, green. Right there? That's a caterpillar. Right, completely and utterly distracted. Wonderful. There we go. It's kind of fitting actually. A caterpillar kind of fits beautifully with the motif of blackberry or bramble. Weird. I've had lots of weird coincidences all day, it's lovely. Right, so we draw from two source points, and the source points are Cunningham's Encyclopedia of Magical Herbs as well as the Herbal Compendium by Paul Barrell. And each time that we do herbs in particular, let's just readjust. We use these two resource materials in order to give a jumping off point. It means that you can go get the book, you can go have a look at the book, it's a good place to start. So this week we're a little bit behind, as it happens. I haven't done an I Can't Witch Without for a couple of weeks possibly, because of ill health and then being behind, so I had to catch up with everything to do with the store, and then we can catch up with everything to do with YouTube and Facebook and whatnot. This week's working witch is actually going to be a spell crystal grid, which is already up on the Starry Eyed Supplies Facebook page, www.facebook.com/Starry Eyed Supplies, all one word. And there is a crystal grid already on there for you to have a look at, decide if it's your kind of thing, perhaps tweak. And it's for abundance on your heart's true path, in keeping with the autumn equinox. So the Starry Eyed page is branching out all over the place. There's all sorts of goodness on there, not just advertising the store. So there are crystal grids and spell information for your online book of shadows, all that sort of thing. So on weeks where there is no working witch on this particular YouTube channel, it will be on the Facebook page, which is a public page and is available to all. Okie doke. All those things being said, completely around the houses with this caterpillar, he's still there, and me catching up. So, we are nearly at the end of the Celtic Ogham month, Mwen or Vine. We run out on the 29th, I believe, which is also the full moon, so it's a really, really interesting time. We're going to have some eclipses as well, I believe. So the energy is going to be stunning around then, it's going to be fascinating. So we'll read from the two source materials and then we'll talk a little bit more at length, because I can talk about this particular energy to death. Okay, so from Cunningham's Encyclopedia, the blackberry has some really awesome folk names. I'm going to read you the folk names. I don't normally do the folk names, but these are amazing. Bly, bramble, bramblecite, bumblecite, cloudberry, dewberry, goutberry, high blackberry, thimbleberry. I just thought they were awesome. given as feminine, Venus and water, and sacred to the Celtic goddess Brigitte. powers of healing, money and protection. Ritual uses. Blackberry was considered to be sacred to some of the old pagan deities of Europe and was used in worship. To the present day, blackberry pies are baked on Lunar Sar by some of the Wiccans in commemoration of the harvest, seen poetically as the death of the god. Magical uses. A bramble bush that forms a natural arch is a great aid to magical healing. On a sunny day, crawl through the arch backwards and then go forwards 3 times, going as nearly east to west as possible. This will cause boils, rheumatism, whooping cough and even blackheads to disappear. You can quote Cunningham on that. I'm not convinced, but there you go. The blackberry leaves are used in spells of wealth, as are the berries themselves. I don't have any berries to show you because blackberries in this house don't last 5 minutes. We're a big berry family in this house, so... The blackberry leaves are... Sorry, I read that already. And the vines are very protective if grown. The blackberry plant is also used to heal scalds by dipping 9 blackberry leaves in spring water and then laying them against the wound gently, while saying the following chant 3 times to each leaf, 27 total. 3 ladies came from the east, 1 with fire and 2 with frost, out with fire, in with frost. This is an ancient invocation to Brigid, the ancient Celtic goddess of poetry, healing and smithcraft. So that's interesting. We'll read that again. The old invocation to Brigid. 3 ladies came from the east, 1 with fire and 2 with frost, out with fire, in with frost. So that's kind of interesting. That's a little bit more interesting than the Cunningham book sometimes is. Right. And there's not actually a whole lot more information in the compendium, which is such a shame. Right. Blackberry here is given as Venus and Aries, herb of protection, as well as magic, also called bramble. Lore. We find within Grieve's herbal old folklore, which has survived well into the 20th century, the leaves are said to be in use in England as a remedy for burns and scalds. Formerly, their operation was helped by a spoken charm. I presume the charm that we have already heard from Cunningham's book. Creeping under a bramble bush itself was a charm against rheumatism, boils, blackheads, etc., which, again, we've already heard. Blackberries were in olden days supposed to give protection against evil runes, if gathered at the right time of the moon. The whole plant had once had a popular reputation as a medicine and charm for various disorders. Magical usage. Blackberry leaves may be used in magical healing. It is also possible to dry the fruit and powder it, making a very pleasant infusion or tea to use in the ritual cup when working rituals for health and healing. Blackberry brambles may be gathered and woven into pentagrams or wreath, hung in auspicious locations within the home to provide protection. Okay, so before we move on and talk a little bit more about it from a Celtic Ogham perspective, and I'll explain why I use bramble rather than the wine vine, we'll talk about a little bit what we've got in shot here. Zoom in a little bit closer actually so you can get a good, there we go. So I've actually included this card on purpose. So this card is from the Ogham, and the name of the cards completely have escaped my head. This is the Druid Plankcraft. Oops, there goes the thing, and oh, it's gone out of my head. Wow. Okay, but it's both representing the Ogham vine, and I've included the card here on purpose because it shows grapes rather than the blackberry, and if you like what then we will discuss that in a little bit. Basically, to cut a long story short, and I'll talk a little bit more about why and wherefore in a bit, the Ogham itself is represented usually in a lot of places by vine as in terms of grapes, and I always had a real problem with this for my personal workings. I'm born under the sign of Moen, and it was weird to me. It didn't make sense to me, and in the end I realised that in England the Ogham itself was actually associated with bramble, with the blackberry vine. And as you can see, hopefully, it's a bit glary, on the Druid Plant Oracle here, the Ogham is within the brambles. We have the Ogham stave itself. We have some, let's just, we have some blackberry flowers, which are a pain to harvest. Trust me on this one. And we actually have here, this is quite funny, I only noticed this afterwards, that after I put the vines down themselves, they'd actually naturally formed into the Ogham, and I was like, well, there you go. And then some leaf in the little bowl there. Right, zoom out and move down. Do the hokey cokey and turn around. Okay. So, talk a little bit about it as, in terms of magical generalized usage, and then we're going to move on to a Celtic specific feeling, because really I work with bramble within the scope of the Celtic path, and it means a great deal to me. Obviously it's my birth sign, I'm born under the sign, and arguably the Celtic tree calendar is a modern invention, but that's not to say it is without merit. I enjoy it a good deal. I think it's a good way to really get in sync with your Celtic energies going through the year. Bramble, or blackberry in particular, is one of those fascinating energies because, of course, it contains a fruit, and the fruit is edible and regularly consumed within an average sort of lifestyle. It's not one of these really exotic fruits, it's not one of these fruits that nobody knows about. Most people, particularly in England, will have some memory of the blackberry. Quite frequently they are baked into pies or crumbles, so it becomes quite an autumnal energy. It's very much associated with the autumn time. I usually do an apple and blackberry crumble for the autumn equinox, which we're going to have at the weekend as it happens, and I like to incorporate the energies of blackberry in with apple, and it does this beautiful combination of fertility and abundance and wealth. So you use your apple for your abundance, you use it for your fertility, and you can do it for a sort of sacred divination. And then you combine that with blackberry, and blackberry has its protective element as well, of course, but also its wealth. It's a fruit, so it's very much the harvest, the success, and you can combine these two into a crumble or a pie, or, you know, fruit on a plate with some yogurt if you like, and you can consume that. And we've talked a little bit with regards to Hazel, with the consumption of certain energies, and here it's really prominent. So there's now a bee at the window. I'm not going to try and capture the bee at the window. You say harvest and bees show up, I swear to goodness. Right, okay. And the consumption of magical energies and incorporating magic within your cooking practice, which is of course a form of alchemy, because you are taking something and transforming it into something else, and then you are consuming it, so then it transforms into energy within yourself, of course. And it's such a wonderful energy, a wonderful magic to really work, and really it's one of those incorporating magic into everyday life type things, which I really enjoy, because it is a fairly simple thing to do, but it can have a profound effect, because you're changing your everyday life into a more magical life, and you're paying attention to every detail, which I think is important. So it's very much about, you know, personal transformation as well, of course, and harvest. So you're taking this food into yourself, it becomes transformed, and then the magical properties are basically infused into you as a being. You become aware of those energies. And people often talk about, you know, you have to be careful with your own energies, you have to cleanse yourself, you have to make sure that you are what you want to attract as one of the forms of attraction magic, although one has to be a little bit careful with attraction magic, because it tends to get oversimplified and then turns into something which people use as an attack, like, oh well, you deserved it because you were being negative, and that's not fair and not right. And there's a whole video onto itself about being very cautious with the idea of attraction magic. However, if you take that on board, that how often we look at the energies that we put out into the world and how we behave on an emotional level and a mental level, and how all those things affect our magic, it's therefore worth considering what we are consuming, not only in terms of health and well-being, of course, but on a magical level, and how certain foods affect us and our magical states. And the consumption of food, and indeed drink, because you can get and create blackberry wine or other blackberry non-alcoholic versions and juices and things, to the point where in fact I actually bought apple and blackberry smoothie this week, again to consume at the weekend, because I just love that combination. I think it's delicious, and it really has this wonderful harvest bounty, and like looking forward to future harvests and future bounties in terms of consumption magic. So that's blackberry as a sort of generalised, that's really focusing on the fruit element. However, being a witch and being a Celtic witch, I'm big into hedgerows. And I've been visiting a particular hedgerow on and off for a long time, and this year I noticed if I went a bit earlier, I could get at the blackberry plants, vines, within the hedgerow. And there's something incredibly English about the magic of the hedgerow. Hedgerows tend to be they're not exclusively, but they tend to be a much more English old magic style of witchcraft than other places in the world. And detriment of anywhere else, and it's not to the bigging up of, you know, English magic. It's just hedgerows are one of those peculiarities which I've even heard foreigners say that they've come over to check out, because the whole dividing things with hedgerows is very English, and people have actually come to this country to observe them. It's fascinating. But because I've grown up here and I'm used to it, it just is a part of the land, and therefore becomes a part of me and others, presumably, because you are where you come from. Your land has a power memory within yourself. And the power of the hedgerow and the power of memory is something very much worth noting, because I think a lot of people will probably at least in my generation, I don't know about the younger generations because I don't know, but from my generation and older, that blackberry picking on the hedgerow was a thing. And I think a lot of people will have the memory of being quite young and harvesting at least once or twice blackberries out in the wild. We had a wood with a lot of hedgerows near us when I was growing up, and I remember picking blackberries. Some people may have gone to blackberry farms or fruit farms as well. That tended to be a strawberry thing around where I lived, but there certainly were places where you could go picking other berries, and it became a sort of family day out to, you know, go picking the fruit and then bringing the fruit home and washing it and prepping it and creating a meal, and it became very much a part of life. And I don't know if that still goes on. I'm kind of saddened by the thought it might not, because if it were me, I'd want my children to partake in that, because it connects you from a young age to the idea of the abundance of the earth and giving thanks to the earth for the gifts which you have received and then eaten. There is an element, of course, of honouring the earth that way, and we can become quite divorced from that idea in modern times, where everything's from the supermarket if we can't avoid it. And in a lot of circumstances it can be very difficult to avoid for a lot of people. We are quite fortunate here that we have a local fruit and veg shop that stock almost exclusively local grown produce, and there is another garden centre not that far away which does the same thing and actually stocks different produce. So generally speaking, we can get local homegrown fruit, veg, milk, eggs, meat, and so on and so forth. And wherever possible, I think that's an important practice, especially for a witch, because it's honouring the land where you're from. It's not always possible, of course, and it's not always affordable either. We're lucky that the veg shop here is very reasonable. But it does become sort of part of the land process. The land memory is what I'm getting at, that it becomes part and parcel of a way of life. Again, that's going to be a country way of life, living as I did most of my life, at least much closer to the countryside than anything else. Hedgerows as well, of course, are places of great magical power. And the bramble is, or the blackberry is, depending on how you want to see it, very much a familiar sight within the hedgerow. And the fruits, of course, are these beautiful dark purple, almost blackberries, which are very bloody when they get squished. They stain, and they can be used for pigmentation. They can get used as, I'm pretty sure you can use them for inks and things of that nature. And if you powder it down like the book suggested and make tea with it, the tea will be a very purpley stained colour. There's something quite bloody about the whole thing, and this sort of ties into the idea that blackberry pie is served as a offering to the blood sacrifice of the god at Lunasar, as part of the Wheel of the Year energy and symbolism. This, of course, ties into the energy of blackberry as being abundant and full of harvest, as well as celebration. It comes into its own between Lunasar and the autumn equinox, known to the Druids as Alban Elfed. And those two harvests are very much about, you know what, those two sabbats are very much about harvest. Got ahead of myself. Being the first two harvests of the year, and Samhain being the final, inverted commas, harvest festival, if you like. And because of that, blackberry is infused with this energy of harvest. It's very much about receiving and being grateful for the energies, the fruit, whatever you have received. It becomes not just about the plant and the abundance of the plant, but gratitude for all your gifts, your talents, and everything you have received throughout the year. And through its connection to Brigitte, it becomes being grateful for all your gifts in terms of what you're good at, your personal gifts, whether it be poetry or smith crafting, very much tied to the goddess Brigitte, or a whole range of other things that becomes tied into that energy. It's very protective, as well as a lot of the vines are, very much because of its spines, its spikes. If I don't know if I can move one, no I can't, right, we will zoom in then. If you can see, there, yeah, you can see pretty well the spikes present on the bramble vine, and I love plants with spikes on them, as weird as I sound, but all of them, you know, like blackthorn, hawthorn, the rose, I think they have this incredible energy which is often overlooked, and the spines and the thorns of things are this incredible protective vibe, because obviously they protect their own plant from being picked very easily. And you will nearly always spike yourself when harvesting blackberry vines like this. And for me, that's kind of the equal exchange. So if I prick myself whilst harvesting vine and I bleed, that is an offering, as far as I'm concerned, to the energies of the hedge, the energies of the blackberry. I'm like, fair enough, we have exchanged a little bit of lifeblood here, because you have given your planty life to me and I have left a little bit of blood behind. And it usually happens nearly every time I manage to harvest bramble, and I, as that, see it as just part of the energy of the, it's part of the energy of the plant. The plant demands a little sacrifice. It's so associated with the sacrifice of the god, and this blood energy from its physical berry form looks very blood-like, and therefore a little bit of personal sacrifice is almost a necessity when harvesting this particular plant. It's not even aggressive about it, it's just sort of regal and expected. Like, if you want something, then you're going to have to give something back. And I've never had or never taken issue with that, particularly given that my birth falls under this particular Ogham. The Ogham energies for Mowen or vine, as I said, have this interesting dynamic, because in some places people absolutely insist that the vine must be the grape, and for me in England it just makes no sense. Although you can grow grapes in England, it's not something that is often seen, it's not something we're known for particularly, and it's not something which resonated with me on a personal level. I didn't have any memories of that sort of thing, and so for me blackberry is what my Ogham has come to mean for me. And the minute I started thinking that way, I was able to connect to the energy instantaneously, where before I'd had trouble. The Ogham is very much related not only to the harvest, which of course we've talked at length about, but psychic senses and the change of perception, a change of visionary state, and examining life lessons. So the change of visionary state can be attributed to a couple of things. So wine is one, so the intoxication element is one, and you can have blackberry wine. So it still works even when you shift from grape, which is obviously the more well-known wine. And the other one, of course, is related to its relationship with the hedge. Hedge, which is saying to jump the hedge, cross the hedge, fly from the hedge, are those that work with the spirits being usually plant energies, plant devas, as well as animal energies, but can of course incorporate the whole range of spirits. And the change of visionary perception is done in a number of ways, some with accompaniments, flying ointments, things of that nature, as well as of course dance and trance work and drumming and altering your state of perception that way. And that's very much associated with the hedgerow, which of course bramble is associated with. It's interesting to me that Mowen is also very much associated with letting go of logic and reason, as well as examining life lessons, which they kind of contradict each other a little bit, because you need your logic and your reason to connect with your life lessons, in conjunction, in balance with your emotional and spiritual states. Now, letting go of the logic and reason is presumably a little bit of this intoxication. It's trusting the process. It's getting in touch with your feelings and really examining through that way. But of course you have to be careful not to overindulge, you have to be careful of over-intoxication, and bramble has that little bit of that warning. It's also a little bit less intoxicating in terms of the wine than grape as far as I'm concerned. So it actually falls better falls better into a magical use to work with the blackberry rather than the grape in terms of wine, because if you are given to excess, then it kind of has a little bit more of a conservative energy, a little bit. So I'm just going to finish off reading to you from the Tree Ogham by Glennie Kindred about Vine. So some of the energies she gives for the Ogham are teaching, inspiration, determination and instinct, as well as loosening inhibition, which of course we've talked about. The interweaving of the vine provides the clue to the essential energy. It unites other trees together as it grows from one to the other, linking the teachings of each into a whole concept. So that's really lovely, because that sort of interweaving, linking energy connects what I was saying about apple and blackberry, as well as the connecting between the hedgerows. I really like that. Interlinking and weaving is a part of understanding the patterns behind a learning process. Links are formed and parts of yourself become united. This is very much how I form energy matrices, so this speaks to me incredibly with regards to magical work. The vine has a determined energy which is used for teaching, will help encourage and guide others without controlling them. It's a good lesson to learn. Not everybody has the same views as you, and respecting another's point of view is an important aspect of being a good teacher. It is better to inspire others than to force your views on them, which I wholeheartedly believe and always have done. So this way each person finds their own path. The vine brings an understanding of the different levels on which we interact, and awareness of the interweavings of the conscious and unconscious mind. The vine will allow perceptions to come to the surface, and it is up to you to trust them and act upon them when they do. There is a danger, of course, that you might become lost in your own subjective, intoxicating enthusiasm, but we have all been conditioned for so long to follow our logical, intellectual mind that it is important to abandon yourself to another faculty. It is your conferred power and inherited right. So there you go. It's wonderful. I love this energy. So that is it for this week's I Can't Witch Without. Apologies in being a little bit behind because of illness and stuff, but we're getting there, we're catching up. I hope you enjoyed this video, and many blessings.